I've been using the Sony A7 III for nearly 3 years now. It's the only camera I own. I did a lot of research before I bought it, and I've been very happy with the results. It's a highly versatile camera with impressive specifications that still hold up 2 years later. It's not perfect, and it has one big problem, but I do like it a lot. Let's take a closer look. The A7 III was released in April of 2018. It incorporated several advancements from the high-end A7R III and the highest-end A9, while still remaining more affordable than those versions. It has a 24 megapixel full-frame sensor, in-body stabilization, multiple recording modes of 4K video, 1080p video up to 120 frames per second, and dual SD card slots, just to name a few features. What drew me to the camera was the full-frame format and the combined photo and video capabilities. I was still in film school when I bought it, and I needed to take both photo and video classes, so I wanted a camera that would help cover both bases. Before I bought the A7 III, I was using the Panasonic Lumix GH4, which is another excellent camera, especially for video. The biggest pro of that camera is actually its biggest con, which is the Micro Four Thirds sensor. The sensor is about 30% smaller than a full-frame camera, which means that the sensor is packing less data into each frame, both of photo and video. Generally, this will result in worse low-light performance, but it also makes for more effective in-camera stabilization and can allow for slightly more affordable hardware. Depending on your shooting style and production needs, the GH4 and Micro Four Thirds could be a really good fit. The GH4 was released at $1,500 and can be found for $700 new and $500 used now. This is a pretty impressive discount considering that the A7 III has not moved much off of its purchase price of $2,000, so there's quite a big price difference now. Perhaps this means that the GH4 hasn't held its value as well as the A7 III, but it is a great budget option now if you're looking for a 4K camera. Let's go over the most attractive features of the A7 III and the things that I use the most. The camera has a sensor capable of 4K video recording, which I use almost always when I make my videos. 4K footage allows you a lot more flexibility if your final product will be in 1080p. You can reframe and scale the footage to rework your shots in post. Even when you're editing and exporting in 4K, the final product looks amazing even though the footage will use a lot of storage space. You'll probably want to invest in some decent SD cards if you're thinking of constantly working in the 4K space, but that's a conversation for another video. I also use the micro HDMI output to allow monitoring via a field monitor. Sometimes you'll see me look in the video like that. My monitor's up to the side there. Since the A7 III doesn't have a fold-out vlogging style screen, it's really hard to frame video when you're filming yourself. This screen's lack of flexibility is one of my biggest problems with the camera, but I'll go into the cons later in the video. I do appreciate the inclusion of dual memory card slots, which I've used for recording multiple copies of important freelance gigs. You don't want to delete your files or lose them by accident. The kit lens that ships with the A7 III is 28 to 70 millimeters f3.5 to 5.6, and that served me well for most of my ownership of this camera. However, upgrading your lens will be a huge improvement in image quality. I've bought lenses by Sigma before and I've enjoyed those a lot, but Sony also makes lenses that are really high quality as well. Neither of these companies make cheap lenses, and so I wanted to find a single, versatile, sharp lens, mostly for video. A zoom lens would give me what I need in terms of focal length coverage, and so I went for the largest I could find while still giving me a wide-angle lens. Sigma offers a 24 to 70 f2.8 at just over $1,000, and Sony offers a 24 to 105 f4 lens at nearly the same price. I went for the Sony to ensure the optimal autofocus compatibility and a slightly longer reach for the same price at the sacrifice of 1 or 2 stops of f-stop coverage. So if you need a really wide open lens, maybe go for the 2.8, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference. These might not be the right lenses for everyone. Perhaps portrait photographers would need prime lenses, or a nature photographer would want an extended zoom, but I do really think that these are some of the best lenses out for video right now. There's a company called Samyang that I've heard of before. They make really budget-oriented lenses, as well as some higher-end ones, I think, but if you're looking for really budget lenses, you can get some nice primes from them. Also check out the used market. Before buying any camera, you want to do some research into the lens ecosystem that your system supports. So for me, I opted for Sony because they were the most versatile. I was looking at Nikon and Canon as well. Nikon has kind of fallen off a little bit. They make mostly photo-oriented cameras right now, although I know a lot of YouTubers use Nikon for video as well, but I wanted to make sure that I would have a lot of video-friendly features, which Nikon doesn't necessarily have. Canon's probably second to Sony in my mind in the camera field right now, just because Sony has been so on top of their mirrorless production. Canon was really late to that game, and Sony has been doing it for a long time, so they've got a lot more solid technology built into their cameras. I remember reading reviews of the first Canon mirrorless cameras that came out. They kind of flopped, and so that made me a little bit more wary of going into mirrorless. Again, do your own research though. You'll really want to consider what your use case is before buying into any camera system. I don't do as much photography as I used to, but I recently took a trip to Yellowstone and I took a lot of photos there. There were a few times when I used the high frame rate capture of the camera for wildlife, which was pretty useful. It gives you 10 frames per second at its highest mode, and that would be plenty of speed for me for capturing fast-moving animals. And the silent shutter is a great feature as well if you don't want to spook your subjects. I often use silent shutter if I'm taking photos of friends and family, since it also makes candid shots way easier to get. Another favorite feature of mine is the 120 frames per second video. Although it's at 1080p, it's still very usable footage, and the detail it captures is absolutely insane. Using 60 FPS for slow motion looks pretty nice, but the extra information that 120 FPS captures is impressive on another level. You're seeing particles of dust flying everywhere. You can get some really insane stuff. I'll put some samples on the screen now. In previous reviews of Sony cameras, I had heard that battery life was somewhat of a concern, especially on earlier models of the 6000 series, which is the smaller, more point-and-shoot frame form factor. The small batteries were reported to be a bottleneck in the production process. The early models were also reported to overheat pretty easily when recording in 4K. Both of these problems were solved by the time that I got the A7 III. I've only ever overheated when I was recording outside in the summer, usually in the sun, and battery life has never been an issue for me. I bought multiple batteries, which I always carry more than one of on hand, and that's always been plenty of power for me. Most of the time I run out of battery, it's because I forgot to charge my batteries. The autofocus on this camera is also really impressive. I've only used it with Sony lenses, so I don't have a point of comparison to any other lens ecosystem, but the time to focus has always been extremely fast. One of Sony's claims to fame with this camera is the eye detection autofocus mode. I found that it works pretty well with portraits and when you're taking photos that are pointedly of people. Otherwise, it's a feature that kind of fades into the background for me. I don't take a lot of portraits. Sometimes I'll do interviews, but I'm not taking video of people other than myself, obviously. Mostly I use the flexible spot focus mode, which allows you to tap the screen to choose a focus point. That works really well for creating automatic focus racks when you're doing B-roll and for picking one spot for the camera to focus on if you've got a kind of artistic shot that you only want the camera to focus in one place. However, more than once I've left it on that mode and had the shot end up out of focus because I forgot to move it to somewhere else. We can attribute that to user error. Another nice feature of the A7 III is the electronic viewfinder and the preview screen. Because the camera's mirrorless, it updates the viewfinder in real time, and changes in exposure and depth of field are updated as you're watching. I hardly ever use the actual viewfinder unless I'm trying to look cool, but it could be helpful for photographers, especially who are working outdoors or in a sunny environment. I also like the customizable buttons, of which there are 3 on the body of the camera. They can be set for, personally I set them for certain focus modes or camera settings like white balance or autofocus adjustment that will require some fiddling otherwise if you're trying to do it on the fly. The build of the camera is really solid. It's made mostly of metal. I think only the buttons are plastic, and I've maybe dropped it once or twice and never had any issues. I've always been impressed with the camera's image quality, both in photo and video, especially when combined with a nice lens like the one I have now. This is my favorite camera that I've ever owned. That being said, it does have some flaws, so let's get into those. There's one huge issue with this camera. It's the microphone jack. It should let you record video and audio simultaneously using a cold shoe mounted microphone like the Rode VideoMic Pro. More than a year ago, when this camera was still under warranty, I sent it back to Sony for them to repair the microphone jack. It would just stop receiving audio in the middle of recordings, or if I rotated the 1/4-inch plug in the port. It ruined a lot of recordings I did back before I was using a separate audio recording system like I am now. Since the built-in mic is turned off when the mic input jack is used, I would have no audio recorded for those clips, meaning that I couldn't use them if that was the only audio I had. Even after the repair was done and I got the camera back, the mic stopped working again a few months later. It's still spotty to this day, which is why I don't use it. And now I'm not exactly gentle with my cameras. I put them in camera bags and I try to take care of them, but I never put enough stress on them to damage the port that severely. I've read on forums and other YouTube videos that other people have the same issue with the A7 III. It's really disappointing to have such an oversight in quality control on a $2,000 camera. Hopefully this issue is fixed in more recent productions, but I wouldn't know. The other issues aren't as major, but could definitely be considered cons for potential purchasers. Somehow, other manufacturers, along with Sony, have figured out how to make a swivel-mounted viewfinder, but it couldn't be included on the A7 III. The tilt screen that's on there now provides some flexibility for viewing angles, but the swivel, I don't know what to call it, like the ball mount, where it like folds out from the side. Like if this is the camera, it should fold out like this and you can pivot it. You know what I'm saying, right? This should basically be a requisite on consumer grade cameras now. Purchasing an external monitor like the one I have to use now should not be accounted for in the budget for a camera at this price. Additionally, the preview screen also goes black when you're recording in 4K and using the HDMI output like I am. It's not a huge deal since you already have another working screen, but it's still kind of odd. I don't understand why they would make it that way. Another odd thing that Sony has become a little notorious for is their menus. There are seemingly endless pages of setting after setting, grouped in a somewhat organized fashion, but it seems like there are way more options than on other cameras that I've worked with. For instance, I've worked with Canon 5D Mark IVs before, and I had no problem with those menus. So I'm not sure what it is with these Sony cameras. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing to have more options than less, but scrolling through all these pages is a tedious process, especially when you're working in the field. Nowadays, the price tag is not a very consumer-friendly feature either. It's more of a prosumer device. I started using this camera about a year before I did freelance work, and it has paid for itself since then. Photography is an expensive hobby no matter what camera you buy, but a $2,000 price tag is a big bill to foot if you're not working professionally, although that's up to you to decide, not me. I do think the $2,000 price tag is a bit steep considering the features that it offers. If you're shopping for 4K cameras right now, there is probably better bang for your buck out there. The A7 III is still $2,000, and there have been a lot of cameras released way under that price point since 2018. The GH4 is a good option if you're going to focus just on video, and Sony also has some really compelling point-and-shoot cameras in that $600 to $800 price range as well. I've been using eBay to snatch up some great deals on used electronics recently, and if you don't mind some scuffs and cosmetic imperfections, there are pretty deep discounts available if you're in the right place at the right time. Would I buy this camera today for its current price? I'm not sure that I would. If you're only doing video, $2,000 could get you a decent cinema rig, like a cinema camera. And if you just need a camera for photo, I would spend $1,500 on lenses and only $500 on the body. The A7 III performed really well when I needed it to, and frankly, made me a lot of money when I was working in freelance. I'm happy I have it, and I don't have any plans to get rid of it, but there are way more powerful, budget-friendly alternatives out there. So I would do some shopping around. If you really need to cross the photo and video bridge at the same time, or maybe you're in film school like I was, the A7 III is a good option. I would probably look for a used model, but this will go a long way if you really do need to do both at the same time. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. Leave a comment below if you have any thoughts or you'd like me to work on any kind of project in the future. Subscribe if you enjoyed this kind of content, and check out links in the description. Those are affiliate links, so they help support the channel if you click on them and make purchases through them. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.